this problem. And the most critical area is that right now for lesser skilled jobs, there is no visa, no work visa at all for year-round jobs not requiring a college degree. So where are all the people who are crossing the border going? They're going into those jobs. So we absolutely need to reform our legal immigration system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your work that you've done on this issue. Thank you for your constant persistence in bringing it up over and over again. You have made a difference on the issue, a significant one, and a difference in the United States of America, and I mean it. I'm proud of the work you've done. Mr. Baer, I can't say the same for you. Man, I don't even have the words, and I would need an hour and a half with you, one-on-one, alone, to go through it. And please forgive
I'd be happy to, anytime.
We'll take you up on that. Let me tell you, I mean, the things that you said to me, and I mean, I'm not being disrespectful because I always try to be respectful to everybody, are bizarre. I believe like I'm in bizarro world. I don't even know where these statements come from.
Well, I got all the statistics in my
I
statement.
didn't ask you a question, sir. Mr. Roy, I want to associate some of the words that he said. I wish you could sit in front of the families, and it isn't just Laken Riley. I can give you name after name after name of men and women and children who were beaten, who were raped, who were abused, who were disfigured, who were harmed. And we keep overlooking that because we say, well, there wasn't that many of them. We don't care about the 400 people that got into this country, the best that we can tell, that are on the terror watch list. Well, it's just not that many of them. Let me tell you, to the mother or the father or the son or the daughter that loses somebody, one is enough. And to have this intellectual argument as we sit here in our comfortable chairs in our warm room where Laken Riley, for example, fought for 20 minutes not to be raped and then finally was beaten so badly and her skull crushed in that she lost her life while her mother was calling her wondering where she was. That's what matters to me. So, you know, today's theme is a simple one. Actions have consequences. President Biden's dozen of executive orders, they crippled our border security and opened up the floodgates of the southern border. That is a fact. Mr. Baer, I don't care what you say. It's a fact. We see it. We feel it. That's why Americans know it. That's why the election that occurred. Congressional Democrats refused to pass H.R. 2, which was a good piece of legislation, and the floodgates opened more. State and local Democratic leaders opened their cities and spent billions upon billions of dollars to care for illegal immigrants. Legal immigration is good. When my colleagues on the other side speak about immigration,
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for Unscripted on 13 Plus. I'm Carson Courier. You were just listening in to lawmakers as they discussed new immigration enforcement policies that the Trump administration has rolled out just in the last 2 days here. So we did want to give you some updates from the Trump administration that have just come out this morning. We know travel plans for refugees who have already been cleared to resettle in the U.S. have been canceled. About 10,000 refugees had flights booked that are now canceled. We're also told special immigrant visa holders, including those who worked for the U.S. overseas, are exempt from this action. Also new this morning, the Justice Department announced they are directing federal prosecutors to investigate any state or local officials who stand in the way of President Trump's immigration enforcement. Meanwhile, CBS News recently obtained a memo directing all federal workers and roles related to diversity, equity, and inclusion to be placed on paid leave by the end of today. All diversity-related trainings have been canceled. We know this comes as Trump announced billions in private sector investments in artificial intelligence, where the Trump administration is already preparing to defend one of his newest executive orders. Taking a look ahead here, we know tomorrow a federal judge in Seattle is set to hear arguments in a challenge brought by several states against another one of his orders that seeks to deny birthright citizenship. Just yesterday, Trump issued another immigration directive reversing a Biden-era policy that banned deportation agents from making arrests at sensitive locations like schools and churches. So again, you were listening in here as lawmakers, they're discussing the increase of immigration enforcement here. We are going to look at another couple of national stories here. We're going to give you your weather for the day and for the next 7 days, and then we will end on this. We'll go ahead and bring the audio back up, so stay tuned if you are interested in listening to this. We'll make sure to end on that so you can listen in. But we do want to go ahead and move along here to another live picture, another huge story that we're covering. Take a look at this. This is New Orleans, Bourbon Street here. The winter storms that are hitting all of these southern states right now, it is rare. It is just shocking millions of people. So what we know is that in New Orleans, meteorologists have tracked about 9 inches of snow here, which is more than the area has seen in over 100 years, which is crazy to even believe. Now, we know that officials are telling people to stay inside. Others are calling it a once-in-a-lifetime generation storm, and they are choosing to enjoy the snow day. Oh, there you can see a news crew out there. Of course they are, braving the conditions, getting some video. We know snow has covered palm trees in Florida. Even the white snow beaches of Alabama. Governors across several states have declared states of emergency. And for the first time ever, the National Weather Service issued a blizzard warning for parts of southern Louisiana, far eastern Texas, because of the heavy snow and strong wind gusts. Now, these are dangerous conditions. In fact, at least 4 people have died in these storms. We know 2 were from the cold in Austin, Texas, 2 others in Alabama. So parts of the Panhandle even saw half a foot of snow, shattering long-standing records. So again, definitely something that we are watching for you this morning and throughout the next couple of days here. I do want to go ahead and bring in 13 First Alert forecaster Allie Potter here. So Allie, as we were mentioning, this is like once-in-a-generation storms for these parts of the country that typically never see snow. You're from Houston. You were saying your parents are seeing that as well.
They're seeing literally what you're seeing right there. They're seeing the same thing. And it's just crazy that you see the pool and then you see snow.
And then you see snow. It's like, those don't go together.
Yeah, they don't really go together.
Yes.
Maybe a drink or something,
Right?
but not on the ground.
Exactly. But here at home, definitely different.
Yes, I will say we dipped down to 29 degrees, Carson.
What?
I
This
know.
morning?
We did.
Oh my goodness.
Just made it there a few minutes, though.
Okay,
But then we
okay.
quickly warmed right back up. Now, it is definitely below our normal, but we're not seeing record-breaking temperatures. That was in the year 1904 at 15 degrees, believe it or not. So yeah, those chilly conditions are going to be sticking with us here, and we are slowly but surely warming up. 36 right now in Tucson, 40 in Sierra Vista, 34 in Nogales. We're seeing 26 for Safford and 27 if you are down in Douglas. Bundle up, folks, before you head out the door. But the good news is we're actually going to be reaching our normal for this time of the year. 68 degrees for Tucson, 68 in Oro Valley, 66 Green Valley, 68 in Nogales, 63 Sierra Vista, 62 in Wilcox, 64 for Douglas, 68 if you're hanging out in Sassabee today. That's all because of this trough. It actually cooled us down this morning. It brought us those cold temperatures yesterday, those gusty winds. And we're going to be in for a little bit of a warm-up, and that's thanks to this ridge of high pressure. But really what we're going to, all eyes are going to be not just on the weekend, but it's what the weekend has in store for us. We're tracking a slight chance for rain. Mostly it's going to continue early next week, but we do have a chance. A 20% on Sunday, Monday, and a 30% chance on your Tuesday. It's going to start off in the north. It is going to mainly hang out in the Phoenix area to our friends up in Flagstaff, seeing some of that snow, but it will eventually swoop through our area later on Tuesday. Today, a little bit of sun, a little bit of clouds in the mix. 68 for Tucson, Nogales, 63 Sierra Vista, 64 if you're hanging out in Douglas today. Here's a look at that 7-day forecast that we much need. And I feel like it's something for everyone, really. 68 for today, 64 on your Thursday, 70 by Friday, Saturday 71. Chance for rain, but that storm system is also going to bring us some cold temperatures. 60 degrees for the high on Tuesday.
Okay. Hey, we'll take it. I love the chance for rain towards the end of the week. But honestly, aren't these kind of average temperatures for this time of year?
I would say mid-30s, kind of somewhere in the 40s.
Yeah.
To, but it's not unheard of. It's
No.
Not, what really is the biggest factor depends on the cloud cover. And we always talk about how the clouds kind of serve as a little blanket for us. and keeps us warm. And that's why notice Friday and Saturday we're gonna be dealing with cloud cover. So you see that drastic
Got
change
it.
for your overnights. And when we have those clear conditions, that's when we remain on the cold side or
Okay.
freezing or
Yeah.
sub-freezing temperatures. So it's all about the clouds sometimes, really.
Okay. Fun facts with Allie Potter.
There
We
you
love to see
go.
it. Awesome. Thank you, Allie.
You're welcome.
Well, sticking with those cold conditions, listen to this. What started as a hobby has grown into a nonprofit organization in Brownville, Maine. One family has taken it upon themselves to help rebuild the deer population there. Yes, hard to believe. Feeding hundreds of animals isn't cheap, but as Alyssa Thurlow tells us, it brings joy to not only the family, but also to people around the world. So again, we do want to go ahead and tune in to this good side story. And then stay tuned after that. We will go ahead and end on that immigration news. We'll let you listen in to those lawmakers here shortly.
Good morning, guys. They hear that clanging of the silo, even the sound of the machine. They know it's breakfast time.
Welcome to a typical January morning for the McMahon family of Brownville. They're in their 16th season feeding deer to help restore herd numbers in the Piscataquis County area.
We're pushing 1,200 pounds in this machine going down.
Last season, they dished out 28 tons of oats in 84 days on their 12-acre property.
We try to get around 5 pounds per deer. That's what the biologists recommend, 3 to 5 pounds to sustain their health.
In addition to local Maine oats, the deer also enjoy a diet of acorns and apples.
We go through 3 bushels.
Each morning around 9 a.m., you can find hungry herds waiting for their meal. Their movements are all captured on live stream and broadcast online.
We usually put all the good stuffs in troughs 1 and 8, and it gives the viewers the best crunching sensation. A lot of people love to hear the crunch. We put the acorns and stuff in those troughs also.
Each day, thousands of people across the world tune in to see the deer and other critters on the Brownville's Food Pantry for Deer YouTube page. The page has 134,000 subscribers and growing.
It's therapeutic to a lot of people, and we love reading the comments, and it's just a lot better aspect for people to watch because it feels like you're really there. The clarity of it is incredible.
Monitoring the 5 cameras upstairs is Brownville's Food Pantry for Deer founder Richard McMahon.
I never would have dreamed it would get this big. Everybody seems to enjoy it, I think, just because it's basic nature. It's back to nature as close as you can get.
Feeding the deer, he says, is his calling. He fell in love with it as a 7-year-old kid in New York.
We used to put quarters in a little machine and get a whole handful of peanuts to feed the deer. I grew up on deer meat when I was a kid. Back in the 50s, this was pretty common here. But now I've changed. Instead of eating them, I feed them.
He's still at it 71 years later.
I feel good when I see all these creatures leave in the spring all fat and sassy and happy.
Keeping them happy and fed takes a lot of time and money. Right now, they're feeding approximately 700 pounds of oats daily to 150 to 200 deer. That adds up quickly. The McMahons say it costs up to $20,000 a year just for feed. To help with costs, they've started a GoFundMe. All donations directly fund the purchase of feed and essential supplies.
We appreciate every penny that comes in because it helps these guys make it through the winter.
Alyssa Thurlow, WABI News, Brownville.
How sweet is that? Now, we do want to remind you to download our 13 News app, especially now within the coming days, coming weeks, as the Trump administration is making a lot of executive orders, changing a lot of laws here. So here you can scan this QR code on your screen, whether you're watching on a computer or if you're watching on a phone, you can always screenshot it and then scan it later. Or you can just go to the App Store, whether it's on Google Play or Apple, and you can search KOLD in your App Store. Here we send you live, local, late-breaking events, any details or developments within breaking news stories. You can even customize your alerts. So especially in this heavy news period, this is something that's great to have. So again, you can either scan that QR code or you can just go to the Apple App Store or Google App Store. I do want to go ahead and leave you all with this look. There's a lot of lawmakers here just discussing the different immigration policies that the Trump administration has been rolling out here. I'm going to go ahead and turn up the volume for you folks who want to listen in. We'll keep streaming this until this is over. Thanks for watching. Join us again tomorrow for Unscripted on 13 Plus. Have a great day.
Beds.
We need a massive increase in detention beds from what we have now, which is around 40,000, to probably in excess of 70,000. We need to make sure that we can fund this so that we can take care of this problem today.
The chairman mentioned that. We're going to, as this committee and as Congress, we are going to make sure that we fund the president's priorities to round people up and get them out of here. Ms. Vaughn.
Another thing that would help a lot would be to eliminate all of the programs that allow people who've managed to get into the country to have their status laundered essentially into a program, a visa program or a benefit that gives them a work permit. And
How do you, Ms. Vaughn, how do you launder a status? That's interesting.
Well, you apply for a program like a U visa program, Special Immigrant Juvenile, or TPS sometimes can be granted. Even though you entered illegally, you're allowed to stay and you get a work permit, and the systems are so bogged down, you get this benefit even before your application has been evaluated or you've had a background check, and many of these have a path to citizenship.
Talking about bogging the system down, folks, in Yuma, Arizona, we had the testimony. They were getting a cell phone, $800 a month, and we were turning them loose. And then the phones are so we could call them to come to their court case, but they would take our phones and not our calls. It's quite astonishing. Mr. Newman, one quick common sense fix.
Pass H.R. 2. Stop the loopholes.
Very
the
good,
administration's
very
exploited
good.
To do this.
You know, we passed that in the House, but the Democratic-controlled Senate would not pass it. You know that? You aware of that? We'll bring it back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Time has expired. Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I am going to try to get through a lot quickly. As one of the few people sitting on the dais who actually practice criminal law in the state of Texas, as well as I'm licensed in Arkansas and practice there, as well as federal courts, one of the things that you said earlier, Mr. Beer, really stuck with me, is that there are already laws on the books as it relates to those violent criminals. And I know this because even though I hail from the great city of Dallas, I can tell you that when someone would come in and they were being held in custody for, say, a crime, they also had an ICE hold, okay? And that was for those that had maybe been deported before and had re-entered illegally and things like that. And so no matter what type of city you're in, I do want to be clear, federal law already, no matter if it's under the Biden administration or if it's under a Republican administration, we all agree that we want to be safe. And I think that's the first premise that we're losing, because there isn't something that is tatted on my head that says that I'm a Democrat and therefore you illegal bad person, don't come for me, go for the ones that have the R's on their forehead. Now let me be clear about this as well, because we've talked about crime and we've talked about fentanyl specifically, and this is also something that I have dealt with, unlike some of my other colleagues. And listen, I'm going to be honest, because I actually want to fix problems. And I actually have a really good senator in Texas, and I'm sure y'all can guess which one is the good one. But let me tell you, if we care about fentanyl, I have multiple bills for that. I started on the state level before everybody started talking about it, and I have federal bills that my senior senator has signed on to. So I welcome my colleagues because I actually want to make sure that my communities are safe. But as we start to talk about crime and statistics, Mr. Beer, I want to play a little game with you. It's called rhetoric versus reality. And so I want to ask you, my first question, is this rhetoric or reality? Immigrants commit more crimes than U.S. citizens.
On a per capita basis?
Rhetoric or reality?
Oh, it is rhetoric.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record this article, which states that undocumented immigrant offending rate lower than U.S.-born citizen rate, and this is from nij.ojp.gov.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. The next one, immigrants are just living off the federal government and contribute nothing.
That would be rhetoric.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I would ask unanimous consent to enter study that says undocumented immigrants pay almost $100 billion in taxes. This is from the Alabama Reflector.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. My final rhetoric or reality question is immigrants only enter at the southern border.
Rhetoric.
Okay, right, because they enter all kinds of ways. I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there. In fact, I have a few more questions because I still got a little bit of time, which I usually run out of time. we have talked again about crime, and there's been this overemphasis on it. And honestly, I can tell you that I don't want anyone to be killed, whether it's here or anywhere else. There is nothing about me as the child of a preacher that makes me say that I want people to die, okay? So I feel as if my colleagues from across the aisle have decided that they are going to make immigrants the boogeyman. It's insanity to me, but they also are showing compassion for victims, which they should, but they have no compassion for people that are contributing to making us great in this country. So, interestingly enough, I'm curious to know, Mr. Beer, if you know if immigrants contributed to these particular crimes. There was a mass shooting in Buffalo, New York that killed a number of African Americans as they were trying to shop for groceries. Was the defendant an immigrant in that case? Do you know?
No, he was a U.S.-born citizen.
Thank you so much. Charleston, South Carolina, there were black churchgoers trying to praise the Lord. They were killed. Was that an immigrant that perpetrated that or not?
No, that was a U.S.-born citizen.
Thank you so much. Now, coming home to Texas, there was an El Paso shooting. Do you know if that was an immigrant or not?
No, they were targeting immigrants in that case.
In fact, each of these cases, it was white supremacists. And so the last unanimous consent that I'd asked for is this article that states that white supremacists behind over 80% of extremism-related U.S. murders in 2022.
Without objection.
Thank you so much.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Mr. Grothman.
Thank you. Eventually, some sort of immigration bill is going to be passed this Congress. We're trying to look for some common ground. Mr. Beer, we've talked about this before. In the past, I've introduced something called the Safeguarding Benefits for Americans Act, which prevents non-citizens from receiving what we'll normally refer to as welfare benefits. I just want to confirm that you think that would be a good idea, probably improving the quality of immigrants we have coming here.
Absolutely. Immigrants should be self-sufficient when they come to the United States.
Very good. Well, there's maybe something we can receive bipartisan support for when we move an immigration bill. Next thing I'd like to point out, and Mr. Moore's always handled this to a degree, I want to point out that in the 14th Amendment, it does not say all persons born in the United States become citizens of the United States. It's all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That amendment was passed coming out of the Civil War. There's a reason it was passed coming out of the Civil War. Congress was afraid that the Democrats would try to undermine the results of that war by forbidding former slaves from voting. And clearly that's what the amendment was supposed to deal with. It did not include anybody who just happened to show up here and have a baby and moved on. Any congressman at that time, as can be seen from the debate on the floor at that time, no congressman felt that resulted in what we are now referring to as birthright citizenship. It was supposed to be limited to slaves. You did not have, you were not subject to the jurisdiction, or you were only subject to the jurisdiction thereof if you were a former slave. A person who came here from France and was just passing through, their child would not become a citizen. That should be obvious. Now, we want to get on to a few more questions. I'm going to ask these of Ms. Vaughn. When a child arrives at the border, okay, one of the heartbreaking stories you sometimes hear in this country is parents get divorced, one parent grabs the child and flees to somewhere like Pakistan or somewhere. The other parent is here in the United States and they can't get that child back. In other words, it results in a broken family, which is just horrible. And I do think we have to do all we can to keep families together. In this country, under the Biden administration before that, if a child shows up with one parent and they come in this country, is any effort made to see whether the local courts, say the child comes here from Guatemala, Cuba, wherever, that the local court has said that they want the parents separate? Or do we just assume that the other parent would be okay with this and not seeing his child again?
Well, if you're referring to cases in which the child is seeking an order of protection from, say, a state family court, is that the scenario?
Well, let's say there's a divorce.
Or at the border itself? At the border, families who arrive, or an adult who arrives with a child is not detained.
Right. Do you think there should be? Do you think we should do something to make sure that we don't have a situation like I described, where one parent takes a child to Pakistan and they're gone? I mean, again, if a parent shows up at the southern, one parent with a child, we don't know where the other parent is. We don't know whether that parent is, the parent who shows up is fleeing the other parent, trying to raise that child without a parent. Is that of concern to you?
Well, it is, because our state family courts are not in a position to evaluate those claims made if the alien child, for example, is seeking a special immigrant juvenile visa, seeking to stay here permanently. There's just no way. They're not held to the same standards of evidence that, say, an American kid would have to receive an order of protection. So this leads to abuse.
You think it'd be a good idea when we pass our immigration law if we said that if a child is here with one parent, we have to make sure legally somehow that the other parent is okay with that, or it's in accordance with the local courts, and like I said, Guatemala, Cuba, wherever, that the local courts have said it's okay that we're permanently breaking up the family, which I think should happen very rarely.
Yeah, that's a tough thing for the American legal system to deal with, something that happened, a separation that occurred in the home country.
Well, we wouldn't have to deal with the system if we insisted having both parents here in the first place.
Right.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Beer, let me ask you, somebody asked you a question about Lake and Raleigh case, and you said that people who were criminals or felons were already prioritized. Isn't that if they're convicted?
That's right. You need a criminal conviction to be subject to mandatory detention. You don't need a criminal conviction if you are in the country illegally already, and the administration can go out and arrest that person even without a criminal conviction.
But Lake and Raleigh, I believe, was the bill we had that expanded that to people who were charged with, not convicted of misdemeanor.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't even need an arrest to be subject to mandatory detention. So there's a difference. There is discretion for ICE to go get someone who is fleeing or evading charges. But if someone has just been arrested and then they're never charged because they didn't commit the crime, it would be wrong to subject someone to mandatory imprisonment in a case where they were cleared.
So you think there should be some priorities in who we try to deport?
Absolutely. We need to focus on people who have violated the rights of Americans, who have committed crimes with victims. Those are the people that we need to seek justice for, not just if they're immigrants, but in general, that's what law enforcement should be focusing on.
Even on pardons, if you had people that were tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, that you should go after people that were maybe beat cops up and led the operation, as distinguished from people that were just showed up and kind of hung out.
I absolutely believe that we should focus on violent offenders and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law.
Is it Fabricatore?
Affirmative, sir. Yes, thank you.
Do you agree with what Mr. Beer said, that we should have priorities on who we go after?
No, sir, I do not. I believe we should focus.
DACA kids who've been in this country for maybe 20 or 25 years and been good citizens, maybe, and maybe been in the military or the National Guard or something, that they should be rounded up and deported as well?
Well, the focus should be on criminals initially, but if you're violating the immigration law, you've violated the immigration law. You've violated laws of the United States, and at some point in time, that needs to come to a reckoning.
We don't have enough monies to put into this to deport everybody that's in that category, right?
I would ask that you would fund that, sir, as Congress.
Well, if we fund it, we'd probably have to cut out lots of basic programs we've got now. It's a tremendous amount of money, billions and billions of dollars.
I don't put a cost on United States citizens' lives, sir.
Okay. Maybe we can get Elon to pay for it. The election's over, and we need to find common ground. The bill that the Senate was proposing, how many Republicans were for that bill or voted for it?
I don't remember. Could be a couple.
Could be 15 or 16, couldn't it?
I don't have the answer to that.
Well, I think it was closer to 15 or 16. I don't recall exactly. But there were quite a few. What did that bill do that was good, and what we should take up now, and what was in the bill, if anything, that you think was bad?
Well, I certainly think that one of the most important reforms in that legislation was that if someone is released from U.S. custody, they're able to seek a work authorization and support themselves. What we saw in New York, and it's pointed to repeatedly about these people who are living in hotel rooms and a burden on the community, it's because they're unable to work to support themselves because they're told you're not supposed to work, you have to wait 6 months to get your work permit through the asylum process. So if the government is not going to remove someone, they're going to release them unless they've committed some serious crime or there's some other aggravating circumstance. They should be supporting themselves and contributing to the community. So that's one important thing that it did. It made some important reforms to the legal immigration process. As well, increasing green card caps for the first time since 1990. That's how old our legal immigration system is. The overall framework of the legal immigration system needs to be reformed. This was a modest step in the right direction.
What we need is legislation that is thought out, not just common sense, but logical, thought out, and planned. Not where somebody might just say, what are we going to do with all these January 6 people? Well, it's going to take some time. We have to take some processes. So just F it. Just do them all. That's a man-child. We don't need a man-child in charge of our government or making policy because that makes for mistakes. That makes for the guy who came up with the Silk Road and be the biggest drug dealer in the world to get a pardon. Needs to stop. And our immigration laws ought to be done in a logical manner and with priorities. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. I think it's really appropriate as we begin this Congress that we start with the issue that was settled in November and why the American people chose overwhelmingly Donald Trump to be our 47th president. I'm a little perplexed, though, Mr. Beer, about a statement that you made that Joe Biden made the border and the immigration system better. Nobody believes that. People in their communities, and I'm not going to ask you a question about this, but nobody believes that. And in fact, behind me, the numbers don't lie, sir. Look at the hike under the Biden administration of illegal migrants coming into this country. And he fixed the problem or made it better? I don't think so. And I would also remind you, and for people watching back home, that it didn't get better. In fact, in September of last year, Chairman Green of the Homeland Security Committee released a press release talking about a letter that they received from ICE that nearly 650,000 criminal illegal aliens were currently in ICE's non-detained docket, roaming free in the community. That means that they were picked up, processed, had their criminal backgrounds obtained by the U.S. government, and released into the interior of this country. 15,000 homicides, 20,000 sexual assaults over 100,000, burglary, larceny, and robbery, 60,000, traffic offenses, 126,000, kidnappings, 3,500. The list goes on. And so nobody actually believes, sir, that the immigration system got better under Joe Biden. So real quick, Mr. Fabricatory, Mr. Newman, and Ms. Vaughn, I'm going to go down the line here and ask a couple questions. When Joe Biden terminated the Remain in Mexico policy, did that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration, sir?
No, it did not, sir.
Ms. Vaughn?
No.
Mr. Newman?
No.
When Joe Biden halted construction of the border wall on day one of his administration, did that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration in this country, Mr. Fabricatory?
It did not decrease illegal immigration.
No, sir.
Mr. Newman?
No.
When he terminated the asylum cooperative agreements with Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, did that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
No.
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 When he bastardized parole authority and changed the law himself, did that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
No, sir.
No. Got worse.
I think the answers are pretty clear. In fact, when we went to Yuma, Arizona, and met with the community and saw firsthand, of course, the Democrats didn't even show up to work. They wouldn't go down there with us. It was an actual Judiciary Committee hearing, field hearing in Yuma, and they didn't come. But we would hear from the people there. The stress on the healthcare system, the stress at the border, the stress on the families. You couldn't even get a hospital room if you needed to have a child or if you broke your leg. Those are the people who were impacted. And of course, we see this all in our community. So let's fast forward to today. President Trump, with his executive orders, reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy. Will that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vaughn?
I believe so, yes.
Absolutely. Will completing construction of the border wall and funding our immigration services down there, will that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
It will help decrease illegal immigration.
Ms. Vaughn?
As long as there are no policies to undermine the deterrence.
That's the key point. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's a key tool to help.
Will designating cartels and gangs as foreign terrorist organizations lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
Yes.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so.
Will terminating categorical parole programs lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
Absolutely will.
Definitely.
Yes.
Mr. Newman? Will terminating the use of the CBP One app, which I think was described by somebody on this committee as the Disney Fast Pass for illegal immigration, will that lead to a decrease in illegal immigration?
It will. It was full of fraud.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty clear. And I think the next steps, obviously, they're part one of this are the executive orders. Part two, what Congress can do. So, Mr. Fabricatore, just for perspective, you served at ICE during the Trump administration and part of the Biden-Harris administration. How would you describe the differences between the two administrations, very briefly, in enforcement of illegal enforcement under both administrations?
It was night and day. President Trump wanted to enforce what was exactly in the INA, while President Biden, the minute that he came into office, it was a change into we are not enforcing these laws. We're opening this border. He wanted a 100-day moratorium on deportations the first day when he was in office.
Ms. Vaughn, final question for you. What steps can we take to make sure that future administrations like the Biden administration don't undermine the actual law or twist policies that we can have a permanent fix to this problem?
In addition to funding immigration enforcement, to rewrite the rules on some of these programs and discretionary authorities to give out work permits and categorical parole or attempt categorical parole. And also, I think to get better control and restore integrity to our legal immigration system. Because when people know that there are loopholes that exist, they come to try to take advantage of them.
Thank you.
Close the loopholes, well said, and I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Nadler.
Mr. Chairman, the flurry of executive orders signed by President Trump on Monday promised little more than the chaos and cruelty we became accustomed to in his first term. His radical anti-immigration agenda will separate families, decimate our economy, and strike fear in our communities. With the stroke of a pen, he has revived the harsh and inhumane policies of his previous administration, such as the Remain in Mexico program, eliminated enforcement priorities, sharply reduced the availability of humanitarian parole, begun dismantling the refugee program, and launched a breathtaking assault on the Constitution by attempting to end birthright citizenship. But the Trump administration's policy of mass deportation and destroying legal pathways, wrapped as always in a blanket of hateful rhetoric, will not fix our broken immigration system. It will only make it harder to reach the bipartisan comprehensive solutions that are so desperately needed. Mr. Beer, thank you for being here today. Republicans are using this hearing to lay the foundation for their own anti-immigration agenda. So I want to start with some important facts about the state of the border today. One, when President Biden left office earlier this week, were unauthorized crossings higher or lower than they were when President Trump left office?
They were much lower, significantly lower, about 33% lower than when President Trump left office.
Thank you. What about evasions of Border Patrol officers? Were they higher at the end of President Trump's first term or President Biden's?
They were 42% lower at the end of Biden's term than at the end of Trump's, and Trump's increased evasions over the course of his 4 years.
And isn't it true that unlawful encounters at the border were trending upwards long before President Biden took office?
Every month after April 2020, it increased. He keeps pointing to April 2020 when the pandemic started and unemployment spiked. But every month after that, we saw increases in illegal immigration and border crossings and evasions of Border Patrol.
Thank you. I want to turn now to the executive order that purports to end birthright citizenship. This executive order prevents the children of immigrants, both those whose parents have a lawful immigration status like a work visa and those whose parents are undocumented, who are born in the United States, from being able to obtain documents to demonstrate that they are citizens of the United States. Can you please talk about how this would work in practice and the sort of chaos that will ensue if this order is actually allowed to go forward?
Oh, absolutely. This is going to apply to every single American child born in the United States. You will have to prove the status and citizenship.
Every child, not just those of undocumented immigrants.
Exactly. My family is going to go through this in a few months. We're going to have to prove the citizenship of the parents of the child. Of course, we can do that. But if you don't have a passport, according to this order, you don't have proof of citizenship. Your birth certificate isn't enough. And so you will have to go through the rabbit hole. I'll have to prove my parents' citizenship and paperwork. I mean, this is the insanity of this order from an administrative perspective. It's going to burden every single American. It's going to call into question all of our citizenship. And looking forward, it's going to create a lot of people who are in stateless situations where they don't have citizenship of any country and can be subject to removal even though they were born here, they grew up here. They are Americans. This is an attack on Americans and our rights.
Let's take a specific example of the impact this executive order could have. The extensive green card backlogs for high-skilled workers mean that H-1B visa holders must wait decades and even centuries before a green card is available to them. Right now, if both parents have H-1B status, a child who is born abroad but who has lived in the United States for nearly their entire lives must leave the country when they turn 21 unless they have their own immigration status. That's bad enough. But under this executive order, even children born in the U.S. to such parents might have to self-deport because they would be denied citizenship at birth. Mr. Beard, does it make sense to send children who are born in the United States to countries that they don't know, may never have been to, and where they have no support network?
No, it absolutely does not. It makes the country weaker. It discourages legal immigration. It discourages high-skilled immigration. Look, when I talk to a lot of high-skilled immigrants in this country, they talk about their family. They talk about the hope they have for their children to be Americans, to grow up in this country and to contribute to this country. And we should want them here. We should want to encourage them to stay. And one of the greatest things the United States has ever done is had birthright citizenship because it encourages assimilation. Everyone who's born here knows I'm an American. I can participate in our democracy and contribute to this country.
And contrary to the President's assertion that only one country has birthright citizenship, 33 do. I yield back.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Biden attempted to reimagine immigration in America. Biden wanted you to think that it was normal to live in an America with open borders, to live in an America with sanctuary cities, to fly 30,000 people per month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela into America on commercial flights, to turn temporary protected status into permanent protected status. That is not normal. It is not constitutional. And now, thank God, it's over. Do you want to know what is normal? President Trump's policies are normal, and he's back, and he is here to help. Within hours of Trump's taking office, President Trump deleted the CBP One app, reformed the parole program, and placed a real border czar, Tom Homan, in charge. And he is a serious man. Trump also signed a flurry of executive orders restoring normal border security and immigration standards to this great nation. Again, thank God he's back. When Trump got elected, we knew that the liberal media we knew exactly what they would do because they do the same thing during the previous Trump administration. We knew that they would attempt to pull our heartstrings to shame us into changing our standard immigration laws. In fact, on the day that President Trump got inaugurated, the liberal media posted a story of a woman crying when her CBP One app appointment was canceled. That tactic is not going to work this time because we have seen firsthand for the last 4 years the devastating effects that Biden's border policies have had on all Americans. And while I empathize with everyone who wants to come to America, because again, we know this is the greatest place in the world, this compassion is misplaced, as it usually is with the left. The woman's tears that I care the most about are the mothers of Lincoln Riley, Jocelyn Nungary, and Rachel Morin. Lincoln Riley was killed by an illegal alien while out on a jog. It should be known that her killer committed a crime in another American city, but he was released because that city, you guessed it, was a sanctuary city. Jocelyn, while on her way to a convenience store, was killed by 2 illegal aliens who entered through the southern border just a few months earlier. At the time, these illegal aliens were still wearing their U.S.-issued ankle tracking monitors when they killed her. Miss Morin, a young mother of 5 children, was hiking on the Maryland Trail when an illegal alien attacked and killed her. And I could sadly name many more circumstances just like this. I don't know about other countries, but in America, our daughters, and I have 2 of them, should be able to go for a jog and a run or to a convenience store without the fear of an illegal alien killing them. That goes for all of our children in this nation. I serve this country to protect my children and our sons and daughters. Mr. Fabricatori, thank you so much for being here. As always, you're one of my favorites. One of the executive orders that President Trump has enacted so far, of them, which one do you think is going to be the most helpful and why?
Well, I number one, I think all the executive orders that he's putting through are going to be, they're needed. There's a reason why he did it. But securing our border, number one, making sure that the CBP app is no longer being used so that there's fraud coming into this country. I think overall, everything that President Trump is trying to do for the border is for the right reason. The number one priority should be protecting American citizens. And I think that was the goal of President Trump.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn, given these last 3 executive orders as well, I'd actually like your take on that. And do you think it is going to improve our border and our immigration status, or is it going to hurt our immigration status? Just out of curiosity.
The set of executive orders are definitely going to improve our immigration status, especially the one that rescinded the Biden orders. I especially look forward to the one that is going to increase state and local partnerships with federal authorities to work on this common mission.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll end with this. Do not allow the left to gaslight you. Secure borders are normal. I have someone that has deployed all over the world. Every other country would never behave and allow 20 million people to enter their country illegally. That's not normal. So thank God we're going to get back to normalcy, and thank you all for leading our charge. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Mr. Knott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Witnesses, thank you for being here. Before I ask any questions, let me state from a first-person perspective that I had the privilege of serving under both the Biden and the Trump administrations. I was a federal prosecutor who focused exclusively on organized crime. And the idea that both administrations were committed to applying the law as it relates to both organized crime and specifically how illegal immigration infested organized crime is laughable. It's demonstrably not true. On day one of the Biden's Department of Justice in 2021, prosecutors that I worked with who had been exclusively assigned to prosecuting illegal reentries and immigration offenses, those individuals were either reassigned or let go. Many of them are no longer with the Department of Justice. And this tracks when you look at the number of illegal reentries. So these are people who were removed after having been convicted of a crime and then come back a second time. The number of those prosecutions, the number of those sentences and convictions decreased precipitously under the Biden administration, despite millions and millions more illegal crossers. Secondly, this bureaucratic and administrative effect that I saw from the prosecutor side, it applied equally to the law enforcement side. I'm sure you know, sir, from your contact with the Border Patrol, with DEA, with ATF, and other federal law enforcement, that these bureaucratic hurdles made it very difficult to investigate, to prosecute, to even submit cases that dealt with illegal immigration. For whatever reason, it was flatly deprioritized in terms of a law enforcement mechanism, that the Department of Justice was unable to bring these cases to the grand jury to charge them and to work them over the last 4 years. Now, I wanted to go and ask a few questions. Ms. Vaughn, you specifically mentioned just now that there was very little disincentivizing illegal immigration. Can you expand on that, just broadly speaking? Were there any disincentives to any person who wanted to cross illegally into the United States over the last 4 years?
No. People understood that if they could make it to the U.S. border, that they almost certainly were going to be released into the country, possibly issued a work permit, and would not expect any threat of removal or consequences for their illegal entry for the foreseeable future.
Mr. Newman, were there any disincentives that you saw over the last 4 years implemented by the Biden administration specifically to disincentivize illegal immigration?
No, not many at all. As Jessica just mentioned, Mrs. Vaughn just mentioned, the getting parole, like those are obvious incentives to coming in, but also, as was mentioned before, deprioritizing illegal immigration crimes meant people knew they could just come in and basically vanish into the country, and they did. That's why we have more illegal aliens in the country now than we did 4 years ago.
And isn't it true, sir, that the border does have vast swaths of the mileage that were unsupervised by order by the Border Patrol? And that emanated from Washington, obviously, but it was implemented with huge holes in the border.
Yes.
And so therefore, it's entirely foreseeable that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions potentially, could have come across the border without contact.
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn, I want to talk to you about how the cartels exploited these loopholes. Over the last 4 years, the price of drugs, in many respects, have gone down precipitously. That's an increase of supply. I saw this in my job. How have cartels exploited the open border the last 4 years?
Well, they've reaped enormous revenue from it, something like $13 billion a year.
That's just known, by the way.
Right.
Yes.
They have enticed migrants because, they could confidently assure their customers that they would succeed in getting into the U.S. And then often they hooked them up with jobs and told them that they would have to pay off the remainder of their smuggling fee by giving back some of the wages that they were earning, all determined by the cartel, pay for housing, transportation, food, all kinds of other expenses they have in what was a debt bondage or labor trafficking situation. That's how they took advantage of these people.
And that's still going on right now.
Oh, absolutely.
That infrastructure is in place.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And that leads to more or less dangerous crime.
Oh, more and more.
More or less gang violence.
One of the ways that they can get people to pay off their debt is to participate in drug trafficking.
More or less overdose deaths.
More.
And sir, briefly, can you describe the impact on local, non-federal law enforcement that these open border policies have had?
It's made it so it's very hard for local law enforcement to respond to anything. They're focused on so many more additional crimes. When the Cato Institute says that illegal immigrants commit half less than U.S. citizens, it doesn't matter how much they're committing. It's adding to what local law enforcement has to respond to.
Right. Gentleman's time has expired.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Onder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I do have some questions, but at first, I wanted to address some absurdities to which this committee was treated today. First, we have the absurdity from Ranking Member Raskin that somehow the 2024 Senate immigration bill was the solution to our border crisis. This No one believes that. It failed because it was a lousy bill. It was an amnesty bill. In fact, it was such a bad bill that it failed to pass. Somehow the idea that House Republicans are responsible for its demise is absurd because it failed in the Senate 43 to 50, including 6 Democrats voting no. Meanwhile, the Senate Democrats refused to take up a real border security bill, H.R. 2. Secondly, the absurdity that somehow anchor babies should have birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. And yes, I said it, anchor babies, because that is the appropriate term. These babies serve as anchors to prevent deportation of illegal aliens. As was said earlier, the 14th Amendment involved slaves after the Civil War to prevent Democrat Southerners from depriving those freed slaves of their civil rights. And this idea of birthright citizenship for anchor babies was invented out of whole cloth in a footnote, dicta, not even the actual decision, by Justice Brannon in 1982. So I applaud President Trump for that executive order. And then finally, the absurdity that somehow things were better under President Biden than under President Trump. You know, I think it's nice that our libertarian friends at Cato remind us that illegal aliens pay some taxes. That's nice. But I would also remind that the great libertarian economist Milton Friedman once famously said, you cannot have a welfare state and open borders. Those illegal aliens cost us in healthcare expenses and education expenses and, of course, in social welfare expenses and devastate those programs. Mr. Fabricatore, I'm a medical doctor. I practiced medicine for 30 years. In the early years of my practice, we worried a lot about drugs in terms of overprescription of narcotics by physicians, and we worried about meth dealers making methamphetamine out of Sudafed, often in rural areas. Today, though, we have 100,000 deaths from fentanyl, the great majority of it crossing our southern border. And then, and a lot of people forget this, 50,000 deaths from methamphetamine. It's not made in a trailer in rural Missouri anymore. It's made in Mexico and comes across our southern border. Could you, this is kind of a follow-up question to the question Representative Nott asked Ms. Vaughn. How has our porous border contributed to the drug problem in the United States?
Yeah, look, the cartel's all about profit. So if they can make a profit in the United States, they're going to make sure that they do so. With the fentanyl that we've had coming in, it's been a boon to the cartels. It's been a boon. They don't care that 100,000 United States citizens are dying every year. That's a cost of business to them. And we should be going after the cartels for poisoning our United States citizens. We're losing 100,000 people a year just off this one drug, and we've done nothing about it this last 4 years. Well, I think that's going to stop now, and we're going to go directly after the cartels for killing our United States citizens.
The cartel leaders are terrorists. I think Trump's executive order makes them eligible for the Soleimani treatment. Ms. Vaughn, you I think touched most on the idea of visa abuse. In my district in Missouri, an illegal alien, once while driving an Uber, once while driving a Lyft, sexually assaulted 2 young women in my district. Now, he was a tourist visa overstayer. Is there anything we can do to crack down on this very common source of illegal immigration, which is coming legally but then overstaying a visa?
Yes, there are a number of things, not one silver bullet, but if we take away the ability of people to work here, that's a disincentive to overstay. But we can also lean on the State Department or enact requirements for them to adjust their visa issuance protocols to address high overstay rates. And ICE needs to do more enforcement on overstays, frankly. And I would also like to see a way to hold the sponsors of some of these visa holders responsible for too much overstaying.
Very good.
Gentleman's
Thank you.
Time has expired. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for conducting this hearing. To kick off this Congress, there is no more important subject than the security of our nation. and of moving away from these horrific policies that have abandoned that security in the name of political correctness or in the name of some sort of social engineering or in the name of political expediency. I've been listening to this discussion today, and it strikes me that perhaps Washington does what so many Americans thinks Washington can do, which is talk ceaselessly about things that have little connection to their actual lives. Over the past 12 years, I led a state law enforcement agency in my home state of Kansas. I've been thinking on this dais about cases we actually worked. Thinking about a case in which a young man, I think he was 26, was running drugs for the cartels. He was driving north on a U.S. highway. He was stopped by an Oklahoma law enforcement officer. He panicked. He shot the officer in the head. By the grace of God, the officer is still alive to this day. He then came across the border where our officers stopped his vehicle with stop sticks. He fled on foot. He carjacked the vehicle of an old man in the middle of the night. He fled in a high-speed pursuit up the highway in Kansas. He realized he was going to be caught. He pulled over to the side of the highway. He invaded a home. By the grace of God, nobody was home. He then shot at our officers, and I had a lengthy discussion with my counterpart in Oklahoma over who got to prosecute him first. We both sent him to prison for the rest of his life under our respective state laws. I'm thinking about a case in Johnson County, Kansas, where an illegal alien in this country was drunk one night, and he struck and killed a sheriff's deputy who had done nothing but his job. He'd pulled over a citizen who was driving erratically on the side of the highway, and the drunken driver, who never should have been in this country, killed that young man. I attended his funeral. I'm thinking about a case in a very small county in north central Kansas where an illegal alien came to this country, raped a child, and we sent him to prison for the rest of his life under the laws of the state of Kansas, not because he was an illegal alien, but because he raped a child in our state. I'm thinking about a case in northwest Kansas where an illegal alien came in a very small county and murdered his domestic partner. We sent him to prison for the rest of his life. I'm thinking about a case in southwest Kansas where the same thing happened. An illegal alien joined up with some lawfully present citizens, stole a car, and then decided to kill the witness, and we wound up sending that individual to prison for the rest of his life. And that's just the cases I can think of sitting here that we handled at a state level in a state where the vast majority of criminal activity is handled by local authorities, not by the state of Kansas. Think of the volume that we're talking about here and how offensive it is to those victims and their families to say, statistically, illegal aliens don't kill people at a higher rate than anybody who actually lives here. Give me a break. So I have a couple of questions for you. I'd like to know, obviously we've talked a great deal about how enforcement priorities and policy priorities in this town affect cooperation and interactive. Out in the real world where federal law enforcement actually work with state law enforcement and they're not getting orders out of this town, they do their jobs in order to keep our communities safe and don't worry so much about who is doing what. They just want to get the job done. It certainly works that way in my state of Kansas. And yet we fight with folks in this town all the way from the operational level. I'm thinking of a briefing that was canceled where I was supposed to go get a briefing from ICE, and folks in this town ordered the local agents not to talk to us because I was a Republican. And we weren't supposed to get access to that information from line enforcement officers. All the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm thinking of a case we argued and actually won back in 2020 that allowed states to prosecute illegal aliens who commit crimes under the jurisdiction of our state. Were not preempted. So here's my questions for you, and I'll go to Mr. Fabricatore because he has operational law enforcement experience. As we figure out what we can actually agree on here that can make a difference, should we or should we not explore the idea of expanding cooperation between local and state law enforcement on the one hand and federal law enforcement on the other?
Yeah, Congressman Schmidt, absolutely. Look, working with federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, county level, all levels of law enforcement makes the United States safer. When we're able to join together and cooperate, we only make the communities safer.
And what about state and local prosecutors on the one hand or federal prosecutors on the other hand? There are thousands of state and local prosecutors who encounter the vast majority of criminal aliens very few federal authorities. Should we work on expanding cooperation between federal and state prosecuting authorities?
Yes, absolutely. Any work that we can do together is going to make sure that we can make sure that we're going after criminals.
And so too with respect to state courts, where the vast majority of these crimes are prosecuted. Should we work on expanding the ability of state courts to assist us in enforcing our immigration laws?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing excites me more than the thought of President Trump initiating the largest deportation operation in American history. I'd like to remind the committee that the purpose of our immigration system is for the benefit of American citizens, not foreigners or anybody else. For the past 4 years, Democrats have facilitated the invasion of over 10 million illegal aliens into our country. Open borders grow the welfare state, they depress American wages, strain our education and healthcare system, price our working class out of owning a home, and flood our communities with violence and drugs. Mr. Beer, and as well as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you're intellectualizing about illegal alien crime notwithstanding. I'd like to remind you that the correct number of American citizens murdered or raped by illegal aliens is 0. Americans have learned firsthand that importing the third world will turn America into the third world. So in light of the chaos of the past 4 years, the question that has come up earlier is, why are our Democrat colleagues so determined to flood our country with millions of illegal aliens? And I'd like to suggest that perhaps it's because they benefit from it politically. Remember that every state is apportioned congressional seats based on population, not based on citizenship. Counting non-citizens in congressional apportionment has resulted in more seats for blue states and fewer congressional seats for red states. For instance, excluding non-citizens, California would have an estimated 3 fewer congressional seats. In Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, traditionally red states would each have an estimated 1 additional seat. Right now, in a political environment where Republicans have a 2-seat majority in the House of Representatives, the presence of millions of illegal aliens in America could quite literally change the balance of power in our country. But the problem doesn't stop at congressional apportionment. The ultimate goal of mass illegal immigration is mass amnesty and citizenship for illegal aliens, which of course means ultimately allowing them to vote. And that's not a conspiracy theory either. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer himself said it just 2 years ago, and I'm quoting him, "Our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here." That is their words, not mine. And it appears that for the past 4 years, providing a path to citizenship for illegal aliens is precisely what the Biden administration has been doing. Ms. Vaughn, thanks for being here. Can you explain how through various programs the Biden administration, either via lax enforcement or through facilitating abuse, has provided a path to citizenship for illegal aliens?
Well, the main way that has occurred, or at least the most significant, are these programs that allow people who have made it into the country to obtain a status and a work permit, some of which do put them on the path to getting a green card. For example, there's the OPT program, which allows either foreign nationals who've attended U.S. schools or who've enrolled in one of these bogus strip mall schools that enables them to get a work permit through the OPT program. That is meant to be, for many of them, a bridge to another more permanent guest worker program such as H-1B, because once they get the H-1B, then they can continue to extend that. There are also programs like the U and the T visas, which start with a work permit and eventually, once they're adjudicated, without much review, allow them to receive a green card, which is a path to citizenship. There are others, including temporary protected status, which are like a de facto permanent status at this point because they're never rescinded. This is, and these are not small. We're talking about probably about 2 million people who are in these kind of quasi-legal programs that get to stay here and be considered constituent.
This isn't a theoretical or a hypothetical problem. This is happening right now. The political party that has nothing to offer voters but inflation, censorship, and transgenderism is weaponizing mass illegal immigration to their own political benefit. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. And I'll yield myself 5 minutes for questions. I think we've come to an agreement on at least one point, and that is that our immigration laws are broken. The Democrats think they're broken because they don't stop presidents like Trump from securing our borders. The Republicans think they're broken because they don't stop presidents like Biden from opening our borders. I think the most illuminating testimony that we've had today came from the Democrats' witness, who opined that the enforcement of our immigration laws was vastly better under Biden than it is under Trump. That is a difference of opinion that we periodically resolve through our elections. And from the last election, it is very clear that the American people agree with us, and they have given us the responsibility and the authority to change these laws so that they can never again be evaded and mocked by a future Democratic administration. Ms. Vaughn, I want to begin with the abuse of our asylum process, which I think is one of the biggest problems that we face. We all know the vast majority of asylum claims turn out to be bogus, but under the Biden administration, just making that claim got you immediate admittance into our country, a lot of free stuff. You were assured that your claim wouldn't be heard for many years, and once it was rejected and you were ordered by a court deported, that order wouldn't be enforced. Obviously, Remain in Mexico took a lot of the incentive out of making these false claims, and of course, one of President Trump's first orders reinstates that policy. But it seems to me we need to assure the permanence of that policy, and we also need to be clear that asylum is reserved for those who've been singled out by their own government for persecution because of their religion, race, or political views. And under international law, once you have crossed that first international border, you have now separated yourself from that government. You have the right to apply for asylum in that country that you first crossed into. You do not have the right to pass through 5 other countries because you want free stuff from Americans. And it also seems to me that if you break our laws to enter our country, you should forfeit any claim to asylum because you've already expressed your intention to disobey our laws. What do we need to do to reinstate these principles and assure that future presidents can't circumvent them? Well,
the asylum system is one of the biggest loopholes in our immigration law right now that's routinely exploited. That's why we need legislation to actually codify provisions to address the problems that you've mentioned. For example, to make it clear that you must enter through a legal port of entry, that you're not going to qualify for asylum if you've passed through a safe third country, or if you could have relocated within your own country. We're getting a lot of people at our border now who've been firmly resettled in other countries before coming here to take advantage of the open border and the parole policies.
So are those principles missing from our current asylum law and we need to place them in it, or are they simply being ignored?
They are really, the clarification is missing. I think that there are different ways you could interpret our law, but they're not going to be as effective. We need H.R. 2 closed a lot of those loopholes.
Your guidance on what else needs to be done to assure that this doesn't happen again would be much appreciated. Mr. Fabricatore, the sanctuary policies, what do those laws do exactly?
They don't protect American citizens. They protect criminal aliens. And we've seen that happen in the U.S. with the rise of Tren de Aragua in these sanctuary cities.
Well, in fact, it's the immigrant community from which they arise that is the most victimized by them, isn't it? I
Yes, sir.
think that a family at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York is far more likely to be preyed upon by these cartels and criminal gangs than somebody living in Scarsdale, for example.
Initially, they prey on their own, sir, yes.
So what can we do about these sanctuary jurisdictions?
Well, we need to look at any kind of defunding that we can do. And look, we need to make sure that ICE is going into these communities and they can work with local law enforcement. If we're really serious about keeping American citizens safe, we have to be serious about letting law enforcement work together to keep American citizens safe. And that's not going to happen as long as we have these sanctuary jurisdictions that don't allow local law enforcement to give information to ICE. Sanctuary jurisdiction in Colorado, probation cannot even let ICE know when somebody gets taken out of jail and put on probation. So that's someone that's convicted of a crime that's going out onto the street, and that probation officer cannot let ICE know when they're going on probation.
Mr. Newman, my time is about to expire, but I would like to ask you to put in a response regarding the TPS and parole abuses of the past administration and what we can do to assure that that's never done again. But I'm now out of time, so if you could give that to us in writing, we will pay very close attention to it. And with that, I believe we are ready to conclude today's hearing. I want to thank our witnesses for appearing. I think this was a very illuminating hearing on both sides. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional material for the record. And with that, and without objection, the hearing is adjourned.